Everywhere you look right now, RTX 3080s are sold out, but I'm told they are coming into stock very soon. And if one of these does land either for a pre-order or it's in stock at your local retailer, is it going to be worth considering? That is Zotac's RTX 3080 Trinity Gaming Edition card. With three 90mm cooling fans and with the cooler individually weighing 900 grams, is this going to be enough to keep the RTX 3080 under control? Well, let's roll those benchmarks straight up, getting into the 1080p numbers, and out of the box, this card does perform pretty similar to that of the Founders and also compared to that of the TUF Gaming, which we recently had through here at Tech Yes City. But one thing that I will mention about 1080p gaming with an RTX 3080 card is that you might want to seriously reconsider buying one of these cards if you're going to go with 1080p gaming. As we can see in some of the titles, we are starting to get hit with a CPU bottleneck, and this was tested on a 10900K, which is pretty much the best you can get for gaming right now. But if we move over to 1440p, this is where the differences do start to expand from the 2080 Ti to the 3080. And the good news is here is if you are an ultra wide gamer or a super ultra wide 1440p gamer, then you can definitely benefit even more so than the regular 16:9 1440p numbers that you're seeing here. Now, in terms of the Zotac versus the other two cards at 1440p, very similar story. There's not a whole lot of difference to be gained out of going over one card over the other that you see here in the graphs. Though stepping things up to 4K, it was pretty much the same story as 1440p, except minus pretty much all the CPU bottlenecks that may occur at 1440p. And so this is where this card really does shine in terms of the 3080 standpoint itself, and that is 4K gaming. And also quickly throw up some RTX benchmarks for you and quickly show the encoder versus the previous two generations, where I feel like the encoder this time around hasn't been improved a whole lot over the second series RTX 2000 series cards, but that was a pretty big improvement over the 10 series card. So if you want to use the NVIDIA encoder, it's definitely going to do a good job. And you've also got AV01 decoding now built onto the 3080 too. Speaking of the differences between this and the Founders and the ASUS TUF, this is going to be one of the most important questions probably on your mind if you're looking at this model in particular versus say the other models out there. Now the TUF Gaming, that came through and that blew me away. I'm not going to sit here in the review of the Zotac card and say that the TUF Gaming wasn't impressive. That is the most impressive card I have seen come through here, and especially hitting at MSRP and being a cheaper entry-level card in terms of pricing, but then providing the performance that did, as well as the noise and the overclocking. That thing was really good, extremely hard to beat. Now this card doesn't unfortunately beat the TUF Gaming in terms of noise as well as cooling, but one thing that it does do is does offer a bit of a smaller footprint if you're trying to fit it into a different build, which I will put the measurements up on the screen here for this GPU in particular. Another thing about the Zotac gaming card is out of the box, the fan profiles are pretty much perfect. You don't want to use a different fan profile if you're gaming, because it's going to either create more noise or the temperatures will run a bit hotter. I found this magical level of 69 degrees at 69% fan speeds was doing an excellent job of not only keeping the noise at a sweet spot for this particular model card, but also keeping the temperatures just under that magical level of 70 degrees. And even in one of the benchmarks I did when I was playing around with undervolting, we even got 69 FPS. Though what about the overclocks? And for me personally, more importantly, the undervolting. I'm going to say this card undervolts well. I think any 30 series card is going to undervolt quite well. And for me personally, I've been using these cards and I do prefer undervolting them because it's going to save you a bit more power on your power consumption, in which in turn should save you money on your power bill, but it's also going to keep the card cooler and it's going to run quieter, which is an important thing, and you're not going to lose much FPS at all. This card did lose a couple of FPS in Horizon Zero Dawn when I tested the undervolting, and then on the flip side, when I went on to overclocking, it was limited to around a 60 MHz core clock, but the memory did go quite high to around 500 MHz, so over 10 GHz on that display, which does look pretty impressive when you're playing your games. But when you do overclock it, the power consumption does start to run out of control and you're only really gaining a few extra FPS. I think for these cards, the 1800 megahertz undervolt is not just a sweet spot in terms of the efficiency curve for the GPU itself, but it's also a great thing for someone who's going with a high-end power supply with low ripple suppression. So you got to remember, when they design these cards out of the box, they design them to work on pretty much any power supply with the rating that they're recommending. So they can say a bronze rated 750 watt power supply is going to do the job, even if it's got a lot higher ripple than say a Corsair RMI 850, which will have a lot better ripple suppression than a lot of power supplies out there. So when you're using a power supply like that, you can then in turn give this card a nice good undervolt with clean stable power, and it should respond pretty well. And so that's why I recommend undervolting, especially if you're going to get a card like this, and especially if you've got a good power supply. Anyway, moving through the card itself, you've got two 8-pin connectors, so you don't need the NVIDIA 12-pin to two 8-pin splitter, or of course if your power supply's got that direct 12-pin connector, then you're going to need two 8-pins. So that's located roughly to just off center of the card in the PCB itself, which when we've taken the cooler off, we can see that this is using a very similar design to the PCB of the Founders card. Now another thing is too, at the back of the card, for those who want to know about the capacitors, it does have 6 of the larger capacitors. So there has been a lot of drama surrounding the caps used and the overclocks and the stability. And when I was doing all the benchmarks as well as playing a bit of Modern Warfare, which is a pretty strenuous game, I do like to play that on all the cards for quite a while, this did not crash once. So whatever Zotac's doing here, they're doing a good job. At least the sample I've got here is pretty stable. That being said, however, if you do have a problem, Zotac say that they do provide an extended 4-year warranty, at least for people in Australia. So it's always good to have 4 years on an investment like this, which is pretty much what it is at this stage. If you're getting into high-end gaming and you want to drop this kind of money on this card, you definitely would want a pretty decent warranty. So it's good to see that they are backing the product with a solid warranty. Though the final thing to go over with this card right here is, I was going to say the RGB, of course. We've got to go over the RGB. We've got Zotac Gaming RGB on the side and on the rear, which you can control with their included software. They call this Firestorm, and you install the app, and then you can change it and even sync it with other RGB software if you want to. And the good thing is, with the software, you can do more than just tune the RGB. You can tune the card itself. And another good thing is, after you're done setting up your RGB, whether you want to turn it off completely or not, you can then close down and uninstall the software, and your settings will be saved into the graphics card itself, which is a good thing. And going through the rear output of this card, you've got one HDMI 2.1, which is essential for your LG OLED 120Hz 4K gaming experience if you want to go that route, which I do use personally, and it's really good. Then you've got 3 DisplayPort outs too. However, this is the standard design. And for instance, the board partners can implement more ports, where we did see with the TUF Gaming, for example, 2 HDMI 2.1 outs. So this is exactly like the standard Founders output design. If you want to get more display outs, then you might want to go with a different card. And with all that out of the way, it's finally time to give you guys the raw conclusion on the Zotac Trinity. And what do I think of it? Should this be the card that you consider getting if you're after a 30 series card? Now, I've compared this to 2 other cards here so far. I've also got 1 more in the pipeline, and the TUF Gaming is still coming out on top for the 3080 series. I'm not gonna sit here and if you've just come out of the bush, I'm not gonna beat you up and put you back in the bush. That's not me. I'm not gonna beat you around the bush, basically. The Zotac Trinity, however, what it does do good is out of the box, it does work. The noise and the temperature levels were mediocre. I would like to see them come down, but if this is a card that's coming in at MSRP, and especially in Australia, if you can get this for one of the cheapest sort of entry-level RTX 3080 cards versus the others out there, then it will do the job. And I think that's what you've come here to know about the Zotac Trinity. Is it a card worth buying? And honestly, if this was the only RTX 3080 card I could get, then I'd be happy with it. It does a decent job, but it does have its limitations where it doesn't overclock that well, and also compared to the Founders, it's coming in with lower temperature levels, but does make a little bit more noise. And for me personally, when I'm looking for GPUs, I'm usually looking for one that brings in really good value. So wherever you live around the world, if this is in stock, say for instance, for some other GPUs that aren't in stock and they may have a huge back order on them, this one comes up, you want to know, is it good? Yeah, it's pretty solid. It'll do the job. And if it's in stock and it's the right price, then I would definitely go for it. If you've also got any questions or comments about this RTX 3080 or anything in general, then be sure to drop a question down below or just a comment down below too. I love it when you guys comment. Love reading those thoughts and opinions as always. And speaking of thoughts and opinions, we got the question of the day here, which comes from Rooks. And they ask, a 650 watt power supply for a 3080 question mark. I thought it needs at least 750 watt. And the power supply thing is, I think NVIDIA did the 750 watt because they know how many mediocre 650 watts there are out there. I've seen 650 watts that are really probably only a true 550 or 500 watt, and that's even from decent brands. So I think they give the 750 watt just to make sure that, hey, you're not going to have problems with a CPU and a GPU that aren't overclocked out of the box. But the 650 watt power supply that I ordered in the other video, that's going to be absolutely fine for a 3080 and also the CPU, the 10700F that I ordered as well. I mean, from the top of my head, this whole system will probably juice around 420 to 430 watts while we're gaming. So a 650 watt power supply should be absolutely fine. And the one we ordered is decent. I have tried it before in a video up here, the 450 watt with a 2080 Ti and a 3950X. And that passed with flying colors. And with all that out of the way, I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.